Good morning. The big news out of Washington yesterday is that President Donald Trump called his buddy Vladimir Putin. Both he and Putin agreed they would decide how the war in Ukraine ends. And if you're Ukraine, that's not going to be good. Now, both leaders also decided they would exchange meetings in their respective countries. That's Putin and Trump. Trump called Putin first, and it's fitting perhaps, and then decided to speak with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The November election paved the way for what Trump has in mind. Some Republicans will be upset with the U.S. selling out Ukraine after all that help delivered via NATO, but the majority of Hill GOP is all in for MAGA and America first. Mitch McConnell often spoke during the Biden presidency of how it was important for the U.S. to back Ukraine, but now a backbencher, that's what McConnell thinks. It also means that European allies cannot expect the U.S. to be involved in the continent for much. At a NATO ministers meeting in Brussels, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth made it a point to say that Ukraine cannot expect to get back its territory lost from the 2014 borders. Now, that's when Russia invaded Crimea and took Crimea. What Hegseth was really saying is that Ukraine will likely have to cede the 20% or so of its land occupied by Russia now as a condition for ending the war. As I suggest, this underscores decommitment to Europe for the second Trump administration. No surprise there. And it lays the groundwork for what Trump is likely to do soon, launching a tariff war on the European Union. What about NATO? Well, Trump has a desire within him, really, to get the U.S. out of the alliance. Republicans and Secretary of State Marco Rubio may try to prevent that. However, Hegseth was firm on the new Trump demand of the alliances that member nations spend as much as 5% of their GDP on defense. Cold comfort with Trump's own saber-rattling about taking over Greenland, a part of Denmark, a NATO ally, and desires to make Canada the 51st state. Yes, that's hyperbolic rhetoric from Trump, but it shows what disdain he has for traditional allies. Meanwhile, a federal judge in Massachusetts ended his injunction against the Trump administration and saying that they could go ahead with the large-scale government worker buyout program. The White House says with a deadline that was extended to Monday at midnight, 75,000 have chosen to participate. The ruling is a blow to government unions, but there's now word of new employees who are still in a probationary period being fired. With ear on the White House, I'm Bob Costantini.